The Valdoran Empire had conquered 17 star systems in less than a century. Their warships were massive, their weapons were advanced, and their soldiers were bred for battle. When the Imperial Council turned their attention to the small blue planet called Earth, they expected another easy victory. Admiral Crick stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, and looked at the planet below. It was a small world, covered mostly in water. The scans showed primitive technology, no shield generators, no orbital defense platforms, just a few thousand satellites spinning around the planet like toys. "Begin the invasion," Crick ordered. The first wave of Valdoran soldiers landed near a human city called New Chicago. The city had grown from the ashes of the old one, rebuilt after some human conflict that the Valdorans did not care to understand. It was home to 12 million people. Commander Veth led the ground assault. He was a veteran of 6 planetary conquests. He had crushed resistance on worlds far more advanced than this one. When his transport ship touched down in a park near the city center, he stepped out expecting to see humans running in fear. Instead, he saw something strange. A human female was standing near a metal structure where small humans played. She was holding one of the small ones in her arms. When she saw the Valdoran soldiers, she did not run. She put the small human behind her body and picked up a metal bar from the ground. Veth found this amusing. "Kill her," he said to his soldiers. What happened next would change everything the Valdorans thought they knew about humans. The female swung the metal bar at the first soldier who approached. The blow cracked his helmet. Before the soldier could respond, she hit him again and again. Her face was not afraid. It was angry. It was fierce. She stood over the fallen soldier and faced the rest of them. Other humans came running, not away from the soldiers but toward them. Men and women, young and old, they carried whatever they could find. Pipes, wooden boards, kitchen knives, rocks. They formed a line in front of the children. Veth ordered his soldiers to fire. Many humans fell, but more came. They climbed over the bodies of their fallen and kept fighting. A human male tackled a Valdoran soldier and beat him with his bare hands until both of them stopped moving. It took Veth 2 hours to secure one small park. He lost 20 soldiers. The humans had lost over 100, but they had killed 20 trained Valdoran warriors with primitive weapons in their own hands. This was not how invasions were supposed to work. Across the planet, similar scenes played out. The Valdorans landed in cities and towns, expecting quick surrender. They found something else entirely. In a small town in what humans called Texas, an old man with white hair sat on the porch of his house with a primitive projectile weapon. His wife of 50 years sat beside him with another weapon. Their grandchildren were hidden in the basement. "You ain't getting past us," the old man said when the Valdoran patrol approached. The soldiers laughed. They raised their plasma rifles. The old man shot first. His primitive weapon made a loud noise, and the lead soldier fell. The old woman shot the second soldier. By the time the Valdorans returned fire and killed the elderly couple, 4 more soldiers were dead. When the Valdorans broke into the house, they found that the basement was empty. The children had escaped through a tunnel that led to a neighbor's house. The old couple had known they would die. They had chosen to die so their grandchildren could live. Admiral Crick received reports from across the planet. The invasion was not going as planned. Human casualties were enormous, but so were Valdoran losses. For every 10 humans killed, 1 Valdoran soldier fell. This ratio was unacceptable. "They fight like nothing I have ever seen," Commander Veth reported from the surface. "They do not care about their own lives. When we threaten their young or their mates, they become something else, something dangerous." Crick studied the reports with growing concern. In one city, a group of human teachers had formed a wall with their bodies to protect their students. They had died with their arms linked together. In another location, human parents had attacked a Valdoran tank with nothing but their bodies, covering the vehicle's sensors with their own flesh until other humans could escape. What drives them to this? Crix wondered aloud. His science officer, a thin Valdoran named Zeth, had been studying human culture since the invasion began. They call it love, Admiral. It is an emotional bond they form with their offspring, their mates, and their social groups. When this bond is threatened, they enter a state of aggression that overrides their survival instincts. Love, Crix repeated the word. It felt strange in his mouth. Valdorans did not have such concepts. Their young were raised in state facilities. Their breeding was controlled by the council. They fought because they were ordered to fight, not because they cared about anything. It appears to be their greatest weakness, Zeth continued. They form attachments that can be exploited. Crix nodded. If we threaten what they love, we can control them. This strategy had worked on other worlds. Threaten the population, and the soldiers would surrender. Take hostages, and the resistance would collapse. Crix ordered his commanders to begin capturing human civilians and using them as bargaining tools. It was the worst mistake the Empire had ever made. In the city of Mumbai, Valdoran soldiers captured a school and held 2,000 children as hostages. They broadcast a message across the city: surrender your weapons or the children die. The response came within hours. Not a surrender, not negotiations, but an army of humans appearing from every direction. They came in vehicles, on foot, on wheeled transportation devices. Mothers, fathers, grandparents, aunts, uncles, teachers, neighbors, strangers who had never met these children but came anyway. They overwhelmed the Valdoran position through sheer numbers and fury. The soldiers guarding the school were torn apart, not shot, not bombed, torn apart by human hands. Every child was rescued. The humans who survived carried them to safety, while those who fell were stepped over by the next wave. Commander Veth watched the footage from his command post, his scaled face pale. "What are they?" he whispered. He had conquered 6 worlds. He had never seen anything like this. The humans were not just fighting a war. They were fighting for something, and that something made them more dangerous than any enemy the Empire had ever faced. The first month of the invasion was a disaster for the Valdoran Empire. They had expected to conquer Earth in days. Instead, they controlled only small patches of territory, and those patches were under constant attack. Admiral Crix stood before a holographic map of the planet, watching red zones of human resistance spread like fire. His losses were approaching 30,000 soldiers. 30,000. He had conquered entire star systems with fewer casualties. The humans have formed organized resistance movements, his tactical officer reported. They call themselves different names in different regions, but they communicate and coordinate. They share intelligence. They share tactics. How? Crix demanded. We control their communication networks. They do not need our networks, Admiral. They use primitive methods, runners carrying messages, signals with light and sound. They paint symbols on buildings that we cannot interpret. They have returned to forms of communication that existed before their electronic age. Crix slammed his fist against the console. In all his years of conquest, he had never faced an enemy so adaptable. The humans had learned quickly. In the first days, they had fought with raw emotion and crude weapons. Now they were becoming soldiers. They studied Valdoran tactics. They captured Valdoran weapons and learned to use them. They found the weak points in Valdoran armor. Most disturbing of all, they had started to win individual battles. In a forest in what humans called Canada, a Valdoran patrol of 50 soldiers entered searching for a resistance camp. Only 3 soldiers came out. The humans had dug pits covered with leaves. They had hung nets between trees. They had set traps using bent branches and sharpened sticks. The Valdorans had walked into the forest as hunters. They had become prey. The survivors described humans appearing from the trees like ghosts. They struck quickly, silently, and then vanished. They did not fight fair. They did not follow the rules of warfare that the Empire expected. "We must change our strategy," Commander Veth urged in a meeting with Crix. "The hostage approach is not working. Every time we threaten their loved ones, they fight harder. It is having the opposite effect." "Then what do you suggest?" Crix asked coldly. "We should target their leadership, their military commanders. Remove the head and the body will die." Crix approved the plan. Valdoran assassins were sent to eliminate human generals, politicians, and resistance leaders. They were the best killers in the Empire, trained from birth for their role. Most of them did not return. The humans had anticipated this strategy. Their leaders never stayed in one place. They moved constantly, protected not by professional soldiers but by ordinary citizens who volunteered for the duty. A grandmother with a gun was just as deadly as a trained warrior when protecting someone she cared about. One assassination attempt went very wrong. A Valdoran assassin infiltrated a human settlement to kill a resistance commander named Sarah Chen. She was a former teacher who had become a legend among the humans for her tactical brilliance. The assassin found her in a small house, seemingly alone. He moved through the shadows, blade ready. He was silent. He was invisible. He was the perfect killer. A child saw him. The child, a girl of perhaps 7 years, had been hiding under a table. She screamed when she saw the assassin. It was not a scream of fear. It was a warning. Sarah Chen moved faster than the assassin expected. She threw a pot of boiling water in his face, blinding him. Then the door burst open and humans poured in. Old men, young women, children barely old enough to hold weapons. They did not capture the assassin. They did not question him. They destroyed him completely, their hands tearing at his armor until they reached the flesh beneath. When it was over, Sarah Chen knelt beside the little girl who had given the warning. "You saved my life," she said. "You saved mine first," the girl answered, "when the bad aliens came to my school." This was what the Valdorans could not understand. The humans had built a web of connection that the Empire had never seen. Every person they saved became a protector. Every act of courage inspired 10 more. Every death became a reason to fight harder. Zeth, the science officer, presented his findings to Admiral Crix with visible distress. "Admiral, I have completed my analysis of human behavior. The concept they call love is not a weakness. It is a weapon, perhaps the most powerful weapon in the galaxy." "Explain." "When a Valdoran soldier dies, we replace him with another soldier. When a human dies, every person who loved that human becomes more determined to fight. Their grief transforms into rage. Their loss becomes motivation. We are not diminishing their numbers. We are multiplying their resolve." Crick stared at the scientist. "Are you saying we cannot win?" "I am saying we have never faced an enemy like this. Every strategy we use against them makes them stronger. The more we threaten what they love, the harder they fight. They are fueled by something we do not possess." "Then we will destroy them all," Crix declared. "If they will not surrender, they will die, every last one of them." He ordered the orbital bombardment of a human city, a city called Paris, famous among humans for something called love. The irony pleased him. The bombardment lasted 4 hours. When it ended, 4 million humans were dead. The city was ash. Crix expected the humans to finally understand that resistance was pointless. Instead, the planet erupted. Every human who had been uncertain about fighting now took up arms. Every neutral faction joined the resistance. Humans who had hidden now emerged. Humans who had fled now returned. The destruction of Paris did not break the humans. It united them. They broadcast a message across their planet and into space, hoping that someone was listening. The message was simple: we will never surrender, we will never forget, we will never stop fighting. Crix received the message in his command center. He listened to it 3 times. his scaled hands gripping the edge of his console until his claws left marks in the metal. He was beginning to understand that the Empire had made a terrible mistake. They had come to conquer a primitive world. Instead, they had awakened something that could not be conquered. The war entered its 6th month. The Valdoran Empire had committed over 100,000 soldiers to the conquest of Earth. 40,000 of them were dead. Admiral Crix had requested reinforcements 5 times. The Imperial Council had refused twice, then stopped responding entirely. Rumors reached the fleet that other conquered worlds were watching the Earth campaign with great interest. Rumors of rebellion were spreading. On the planet below, the humans had organized themselves into a global resistance network. They called it the Human Defense Alliance, or HDA. Every nation, every faction, every group had set aside their differences. They had one enemy now, and they fought as one species. Sarah Chen had become the symbol of the resistance. She traveled constantly, appearing in cities and villages to inspire the fighters. She was not their commander. The humans did not have a single commander. They had thousands of leaders who made decisions together. This decentralized structure drove the Valdorans crazy. They could not cut off the head because there was no head to cut. Every cell of the resistance could operate independently. Every human was both a soldier and a leader. Commander Veth had been reassigned to a relatively quiet sector after his failures in the early invasion. His zone included a small human settlement called Hope Valley. It was a farming community of about 2,000 people, located in a mountain region. Veth saw no military value in the settlement, but his new strategy was to control the food supply, starve the humans into submission. He ordered his soldiers to seize Hope Valley and its surrounding farms. The assault began at dawn. Valdoran troops approached from 3 directions, expecting minimal resistance. They found walls made of earth and stone. They found trenches filled with determined humans. They found children loading weapons for adults who fired them without stopping. Veth watched from his command vehicle as his soldiers were cut down. The humans had learned to aim for the gaps in Valdoran armor. They had learned that Valdoran soldiers could not see well in smoke, so they burned wet wood and plants to create thick clouds. They had learned everything they needed to survive. After 3 hours, Veth called for retreat. He had lost 60 soldiers. He had not gained a single meter of ground. That night he received a message from the settlement. It was a video, clearly recorded on primitive equipment. A human female appeared on the screen. She was old, with gray hair and deep lines on her face. She held a weapon with practiced ease. "I am Mayor Elena Rodriguez of Hope Valley," she said. "I have a message for the Valdoran commander." Veth leaned forward, curious despite himself. "You want our food. You want our land. You want us to surrender." The old woman smiled, and there was no fear in it. "This valley has been farmed by my family for 7 generations. My great-great-great-grandmother walked across mountains to reach this place when she was pregnant with my great-great-grandmother. She built the first house with her own hands." The camera panned to show the valley behind her. Fields of crops, simple houses, humans of all ages watching, their faces set with determination. "Every person in this valley has a story like mine. Every family has roots that go deep into this soil. We have buried our ancestors here. We have raised our children here. We have lived and loved and died here for 200 years. She looked directly at the camera, and Veth felt something strange, something he had never felt before. It might have been respect. "You cannot take this from us," Elena Rodriguez said. "Not because we are strong, not because we have great weapons, but because this place is not just land. It is who we are. You would have to kill every single one of us down to the last child, and even then our ghosts would haunt you forever." The message ended. Veth sat in silence for a long time. The next morning, he reported to Admiral Crix that Hope Valley was of no strategic value and should be bypassed. He did not mention the message. He did not understand why he made this decision. But Hope Valley remained free. Across the planet, similar stories played out. Human communities defended themselves with impossible courage. They protected their homes, their families, their traditions. They fought not for glory or conquest, but for the right to continue existing. The Valdoran soldiers, bred for war in state facilities, had no concept of home. They had no ancestors to honor. They had no children. They had raised themselves. They fought because they were ordered to fight, and when the fighting became too hard, their morale collapsed. Desertions began. Small numbers at first, then larger groups. Valdoran soldiers would disappear during patrols, their weapons and armor abandoned. They could not escape the planet, but they could hide. Some of them found refuge with humans. This was the most shocking development of all. Humans, despite everything the Valdorans had done, would sometimes choose to help individual Valdoran deserters. A young Valdoran soldier named Crix Minor, no relation to the admiral, was found wounded in a forest by a human hunting party. He expected to be killed. Instead, they carried him to their village and tended his wounds. "Why?" he asked the human who treated him, a male with dark skin and gentle hands. "Because you're hurt," the human said simply. "And hurting people is not who we want to be, even when they deserve it." Crix Minor did not understand. His people would never show mercy to a wounded enemy. But the humans fed him, healed him, and eventually let him go. He walked back to the Valdoran lines in a daze. He never fought against humans again. He told other soldiers what had happened. Some called him a traitor. Others listened and began to question what they were doing on this strange planet. The humans were changing the Valdorans. This was perhaps more dangerous than any military victory. Admiral Crix received these reports with mounting horror. His invasion was not just failing, it was corrupting his own forces. The humans, with their strange concept of love, were infecting his soldiers with doubt. He made a decision. He would end this war with one massive strike. He ordered all forces to concentrate on a single human city, New Shanghai, the largest population center on the planet. 15 million humans lived there. "We will burn it to the ground," Crix announced, "and we will broadcast the destruction to every corner of this planet. They will learn that resistance is death." His officers acknowledged the order. Ships began moving into position. Weapons were charged. But the humans had spies everywhere. The warning reached New Shanghai hours before the attack was scheduled to begin. 15 million people began to move. They moved with a coordination that seemed impossible. Trains carried people inland. Vehicles of every kind formed rivers of humanity flowing away from the coast. Those who could not travel were carried by those who could. Children held hands with strangers. Old people were pushed in wheeled chairs by teenagers they had never met. When the Valdoran ships arrived to begin the bombardment, the city was empty. 15 million people had vanished in less than 12 hours. They had saved each other again. The war was in its 11th month when the first Valdoran ship was captured. It happened near a place humans called the Sea of Japan. A Valdoran patrol vessel was making a routine flight when its engines suddenly failed. The ship crashed into the water and began to sink. The crew abandoned the vessel and activated their emergency beacons. Human boats arrived before Valdoran rescue ships could respond. The crew was captured. The ship was salvaged. This had never happened before. No conquered species had ever captured a Valdoran ship intact. The technology was supposed to be protected by self-destruct mechanisms that would trigger if the vessel fell into enemy hands. But a young human engineer named James Kim had figured out how to disable those mechanisms. He had spent months studying captured Valdoran equipment, teaching himself the alien technology through trial and error. When the patrol vessel crashed, he was ready. Within weeks, the humans had reverse-engineered the ship's basic systems. They could not build their own ships yet, but they understood how Valdoran technology worked. More importantly, they understood its weaknesses. James Kim became another legend of the Resistance. He was 23 years old. Before the invasion, he had been a graduate student studying robotics. Now, he led a team of scientists and engineers who were turning Valdoran weapons against their creators. Every piece of technology has a flaw, James told his team. The Valdorans have been conquering for so long that they've stopped looking for their own weaknesses. They think they're perfect. That's the biggest weakness of all. His team discovered that Valdoran armor was vulnerable to certain frequencies of sound. They built devices that could generate these frequencies, causing the armor to crack. They discovered that Valdoran communications could be jammed using modified human radio equipment. They discovered that Valdoran soldiers had difficulty seeing certain colors that humans could see easily, and they used this for camouflage. Each discovery was shared across the Resistance network. Each discovery made the humans more deadly. Admiral Crix watched his advantage disappear day by day. His soldiers were dying. His technology was being stolen. His authority was being questioned. The Imperial Council had finally responded to his requests, but not with reinforcements. They had sent an investigator to determine why the conquest of a primitive world was taking so long. The investigator was a cold-eyed female named Vorax. She spent 3 days reviewing Crix's reports, then requested a private meeting. "Admiral, this invasion is a catastrophe," she said without emotion. "You have lost 60,000 soldiers. You control less than 5% of the planet's surface. The humans are now using our own weapons against us. Explain." Crix had no explanation. He had followed standard conquest protocols. He had used proven strategies. He had done everything correctly. "The humans are different," he finally said. "They do not fight like any species we have encountered. They are willing to die in numbers that would cause any rational population to surrender. They form bonds of attachment that make them irrational. They call it love." Vorax made a note on her data tablet. "Love," she repeated. "This is the explanation for the Empire's greatest military failure, a concept that our scientists have identified in primitive species as a biological mechanism for offspring protection. It is more than that. It extends beyond offspring. They love their mates, their parents, their communities, their entire species. When one human dies, the others do not become afraid. They become angry. They fight harder." "Then we must kill them all," Vorax said. "Total extinction. It is the only solution." "We have tried targeted elimination. It only strengthens their resolve." "I did not say targeted. I said total. Every human on the planet, every man, woman, and child. No exceptions. No survivors. No one left to remember that they ever existed." Crix stared at her. In a century of conquest, the Empire had never attempted total extinction of a species. It was considered wasteful. Conquered populations provided labor, resources, and soldiers for future wars. "The Council has authorized this action?" he asked. "The Council is considering it. My report will recommend it as the only viable option." Vorax stood to leave. "You have 3 months, Admiral. If you have not conquered this planet by then, the extinction protocol will be implemented." She left Crix alone on the bridge of his flagship. He looked down at the planet below, the small blue world that had destroyed his career and might destroy the Empire itself. 3 months. He began planning the final assault. The humans, of course, learned about this plan. They had spies in unexpected places. A Valdoran communications officer who had been captured months earlier had agreed to help the Resistance. He had been treated with kindness despite everything, and kindness had converted him more effectively than any torture. The news spread across the planet. The Valdorans were planning total extinction. Every human would die. The species would cease to exist. Sarah Chen called an emergency meeting of the Human Defense Alliance. Leaders from every continent appeared on screens. their faces grim. They had faced death before, but this was different. This was the end of everything. "We have 3 months," Sarah said. 3 months to defeat the most powerful empire in the galaxy. 3 months to save our species." "How?" asked a Russian general. "We have been fighting for almost a year. We have hurt them, yes. We have slowed them, but we cannot defeat them in 3 months." "We cannot defeat them with weapons," Sarah agreed. "But there are other ways to win a war." She outlined a plan that was bold beyond anything they had attempted. It would require every human on the planet to participate. It would require sacrifice on a scale that seemed impossible. But it might work. It was their only hope. The plan was simple in concept. They would make it impossible for the Valdorans to kill all humans even if they tried. They would spread across the planet in small groups. They would dig underground shelters that could not be detected from orbit. They would preserve their knowledge, their culture, their history in hidden caches. They would ensure that even if billions died, some would survive. But the plan had a second part, more ambitious than the first. They would reach out to other species the Empire had conquered. They would share everything they had learned about fighting the Valdorans. They would try to start a rebellion across the galaxy. It was a desperate gamble. The humans had no way to travel between stars, but they had something more powerful, a message that could spread faster than any ship. They began broadcasting on every frequency they could manage. They told their story. They shared their tactics. They explained what love was and why it made them fight. They sent this message into the void, hoping that someone was listening. And someone was. The message from Earth reached 100 worlds within weeks. It traveled through subspace, relays the Valdorans used for official communications. Resistance groups across the galaxy heard the voice of humanity for the first time. On a planet called Veth Prime, enslaved for 60 years, the message was received by a young female named Kira. She had never known freedom. She had been born in a labor camp, worked in a factory since she was old enough to walk. She had never heard of love. But when she heard the human broadcasts, something awakened inside her. These strange creatures from a small blue planet were doing what she had always dreamed of doing. They were fighting back. She began sharing the message with others, secretly at first, then more openly as she found others who felt the same. Within a month there were 50 of them. Within 2 months there were 5,000. On a world called New Valdor, a colony established a century ago, the human message reached soldiers who had been stationed there for years. These soldiers had families now, children born on this world who had never seen the Empire's home planet. They had begun to forget why they conquered. One soldier, a male named Torix, listened to the human broadcasts every night. He heard stories of parents protecting children, of lovers defending each other, of strangers becoming family in the face of danger. He looked at his own child, born to a female from a conquered species, and felt something strange. Something that might have been love. He began talking to other soldiers. They began questioning orders. They began refusing to carry out punishments against the local population. The chain of command started to break. On a prison world called Desolation, where political prisoners from a dozen species were sent to die, the human message arrived like a sunrise. The prisoners had given up hope. They waited for death in silence. Then they heard Sarah Chen's voice, translated into 100 languages. "We are humans. We come from a planet called Earth. We have been fighting the Valdoran Empire for almost a year. They have killed millions of us, but we have not surrendered. We will never surrender, because we fight for something more powerful than ourselves. We fight for love." The prisoners began to organize. They began to plan. They began to hope. Admiral Crix knew none of this. He was focused entirely on the final assault. He had gathered his remaining forces for one massive attack that would break human resistance forever. 60,000 soldiers, 200 ships, weapons that could crack a planet's crust. The attack would begin in 4 days. On Earth, the humans had completed their preparations. Billions of people had moved to hidden locations. Underground cities had been carved out of rock. Food and supplies had been cached. Knowledge had been preserved in formats that could survive for millennia. But Sarah Chen had one more card to play. She appeared on a broadcast that went not just across Earth, but into space, using captured Valdoran transmitters. Her face was tired but calm. She spoke slowly, clearly, knowing that the translation systems would carry her words to 100 worlds. "I have a message for the Valdoran soldiers," she said. "You have been told that we are primitive, that we are weak, that we will be easy to destroy. You have learned that this is not true." She paused, letting the words sink in. "You have also been told that your empire is eternal, that it cannot be defeated, that resistance is pointless. You are about to learn that this is not true either." She looked directly at the camera. "Right now, across the galaxy, the species you have conquered are rising against you. They have heard our story. They have learned what we know. They have discovered something your empire tried to keep hidden, that you can be beaten, that your soldiers can die, that your ships can fall." Admiral Crix was watching the broadcast in his command center. His face went pale. "We are not fighting alone anymore," Sarah Chen continued. "We are the beginning of something your empire cannot stop. You can kill us all. You can burn our planet to ash. But the fire we have started will spread. Every species you have conquered has heard our message. Every one of them knows that the Valdoran Empire can be defeated." She smiled, and there was something terrible in that smile. "You came to Earth to conquer a primitive world. Instead, you awakened a galaxy. And now it's too late to stop what you've started." The broadcast ended. Admiral Crix stood frozen, unable to move. His officers stared at their consoles in silence. Then the reports began to flood in. Rebellion on Veth Prime. 5,000 armed workers had seized a military depot. Mutiny on New Valdor. Soldiers were refusing orders. Entire units were defecting. Prison break on Desolation. Thousands of political prisoners had overwhelmed their guards using improvised weapons and numbers. And more, dozens of worlds, hundreds of incidents. The Empire was burning. The invasion of Earth had been the match that lit a galactic fire. Admiral Crix received an emergency transmission from the Imperial Council. It was brief. "Abort Earth invasion. Return all forces to core worlds. The Empire is under attack." He should have felt relieved. The extinction protocol was cancelled. He would not have to kill every human on the planet, but he felt only a cold emptiness. His fleet withdrew from Earth's orbit. They left behind 40,000 graves and a legend that would spread across the stars. The humans had won, not through superior weapons or tactics, not through strength or numbers. They had won because they had something the Empire could not defeat, a reason to fight that was stronger than death. Months later, when the first alien diplomats arrived on Earth to meet the species that had changed the galaxy, they asked Sarah Chen the question that everyone wanted answered. "How did you do it? How did a primitive world defeat the greatest military power in the galaxy?" Sarah Chen looked at the diplomats. They were from a species called the Threll, freed from Valdoran rule just weeks earlier. They had tentacles instead of arms and multiple eyes that glittered with curiosity. "We had something worth fighting for," she said simply. "What thing?" "Everything," she gestured at the world around her. "Our families, our friends, our homes, our history, our future. Every song we've ever sung and every story we've ever told. Every child who might be born and every dream that might come true. We fought for all of it." The Threll diplomat seemed confused. "But these things are abstract. They cannot help in battle." Sarah Chen smiled. "You're wrong. They're the only things that can help in battle. When you fight for something you love, you become more than yourself. You become part of everything you're protecting. And that makes you very, very hard to kill." The humans rebuilt their world in the years that followed. Cities rose from ashes. Families reunited. Children were born who would never know the fear of invasion. The blue planet spun on through space, ordinary and beautiful. But the universe remembered what had happened there. The story of Earth spread to every corner of the galaxy. It became a legend, then a myth, then something like a religion to the species who had been freed. And at the heart of the story was always the same message. The humans fought hardest when protecting something they loved. And because they loved so much, so widely, so deeply, they could never be truly defeated. The Valdoran Empire crumbled over the following decades. It was replaced by a confederation of species who had learned from humanity's example. They called it the Alliance of Free Worlds. The first article of their founding charter was simple. We recognize that the bond between sentient beings, known by many names across the galaxy but first called love by the humans of Earth, is the foundation of civilization and the right of all people. Admiral Crix, stripped of rank and exiled to a remote outpost, spent his remaining years studying human culture. He never understood love fully, but he came to respect it. He wrote in his final journal, "We thought love was their weakness. It was their greatest weapon, and we put it in the hands of a galaxy." On Earth, Sarah Chen lived to be very old. She saw humanity take its first steps among the stars. She saw her grandchildren play with children from a dozen different species. She saw the universe become a little kinder, a little more connected, because of what her people had survived. On her last day, surrounded by family, she spoke her final words. "We loved, that's why we won. Remember to keep loving, it's the only thing that matters." The sun set over Hope Valley that evening, the same valley that Commander Veth had chosen not to attack so many years before. Elena Rodriguez's descendants still farmed the land. Their roots still went deep into the soil. And in the sky above, the stars shone bright with the light of 1,000 freed worlds, each one carrying a piece of the fire that humanity had started. The Empire had discovered that humans fight hardest when protecting something they love. The galaxy had discovered that love itself was the greatest force in the universe. And somewhere on 1,000 worlds, beings looked up at the stars and knew that they were not alone. They knew that a small blue planet had changed everything. They knew that love had won. It always does.